Hello, good evening, and welcome to this COVID hit Friday Conversations. Tonight you should have been seeing Matt and Clive talking, but tonight instead you've got the starting of Alan and myself, Keith Smith. So welcome to everybody who's watching, and tonight's topic is on mission. And we'll start to unpack that as we go. But as normal, we'll start with a bit of scripture. So Alan, I've asked Alan if he'd read us something. So over to you, Alan, together.
Okay, so I'm reading from Matthew 10 and verses 5 to 10. And it's Jesus speaking to the disciples saying, "Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for the journey, or extra shirt or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep." And I also want to read from Matthew 28, where Jesus again is saying, this is the Great Commission, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age."
Great, thanks, Alan. Thanks. So as for me is my regular pattern, the first thing I'm trying to do is actually understand what we're going to be talking about this evening. So the title we've been given is On Mission. So for you, if you don't mind me asking, Alan, for you, what do you understand by being on mission?
Well, it's interesting you ask me that, because mission has got a biblical terminology and a non-Christian terminology, but the word itself, mission, doesn't appear in the Bible very often. It's at the heart of the message of the Bible, though the word actually mission only appears sparingly. It refers to God sending people to announce his work of judgment and redemption on earth, hence that Matthew 28. But in the secular world, we think of mission as well in terms of people going on in a mission. We see people being sent on missions at the moment to Russia to try and plead with Putin not to start another war. So an important assignment given to a person or a group of people, typically involving travel abroad. And then we have a different sort of a mission, like when we sent man to the moon, the mission to put man on the moon. And then we have personal missions, a strongly felt aim or an ambition or calling, and you'll know all about that from the mission you're going to talk about a little later on. So we have different forms of mission.
Yeah, so, and I was telling Alan when we first go in. So we agreed to do this on Tuesday when Clive and Matt were still positive, COVID positive. And we said, okay, we'll do it because we don't know when you'll be COVID negative. So I just took it on board and then started to prepare. And to be frank, I looked at it and thought, oh, this is very like what I was doing 2 weeks ago when we did the Great Commission. And I was thinking, okay, I'm doing the same thing twice, what's going on? And it was only today when actually the penny dropped that the Great Commission is about when you're being asked to do something, and being on mission, of course, is when you're doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is not what's God asked you to do, but really when you've been asked to do something, how do you do it? How do you actually get on with it?
And it could be a big thing, like the examples I've just been given, or it could be something small, like me receiving a phone call on Tuesday evening from Keith. "Alan, can you help out on Friday with the Friday Conversations? But you did give me a get out if I didn't think I could prepare in time." So I thought, let me think about it overnight, which I did. And I woke the next morning, I'd prayed about it, and I thought, actually, if we're asked to go on a mission, we're probably going to be given the tools to do it. Yeah. And that is exactly right. God does give us the tools. I prayed again about it this time. Please help me find the words and the material to talk about this. And I did, in fact, start that 2 weeks ago Friday Conversations, which I was privileged to be here in the room at. So I watched it through again, and of course that was the Great Commission, the setting out of what needs to be done. Now we're going to talk about the mission of actually accomplishing whatever the mission happens to be.
Yeah, that's great. So what we'll do then as part of tonight is I've asked both Alan and I've prepared a bit myself to talk about where God's asked us to do a mission, and we'll have a look at that and we'll share about that. But first of all, let's, if you don't mind, Alan, let's just talk about that passage we just read. So Jesus sends them out on a mission, and he starts with what you said. So in that passage, for me, the clear thing that I've been seeing is the fact that Jesus gives them actually very precise instructions, doesn't he?
He does, and even down to how much they should take with them.
Yep.
And it amused me here, no bag for the journey, or even don't take an extra shirt or sandals. Can't imagine that in this day and age, can you?
No.
The stuff you take away with you.
That's it.
A different era, I suppose.
But the challenge for me then, and I'm sure the challenges for the disciples, was the fact that so you've been given instructions, and sometimes we hear God and we think, oh yeah, this is what God's asking me to do. But it's then actually believing that you can do it, isn't it?
Well, there is that element of believing you can do it, because often the task comes without any other instructions on what to do next. So if you've been given a task, the assumption of the task giver is that you are able to carry out the task, and you're going to then act on your initiative to see the project through.
Yeah. So I wonder what it was like. I try to imagine how would they start the conversations off, and how would they lead those conversations? Because here they are trying to tell good news. But I don't know about you, but personally I find it really challenging at times. How do you initiate the conversation? Some people do it really well. Clive is really good at it. He can have conversations with all sorts of people. But personally, it's certainly in the work setting, I find it really challenging how to start it off without seemingly being inappropriate, because people don't often want to talk about religion, and yet at the same time it's a key part of your life. So it's thinking about them, they must have been the same thing, because they were Jews, weren't they? Everybody around them was Jews, they would have all assumed certain things. But so now they have to introduce this idea that the Messiah is here now.
And not easy, I would imagine.
No. Have you, in your work context then, in your work life, or in any other parts of your life, so have you ever had to be like that? So God's given you a task, and yet you're trying to figure out, how do I do it? What's my way in? And have you ever experienced that and found a way?
Yeah, I've got an example I would like to take a minute or two, if I may. It goes back a while when I was a member of a fellowship in Surrey.
Okay.
It was a large fellowship, quite a very large one, about 500-600 people, split up into congregations and house groups.
Oh, right.
And we'd been there for about 10 years, happily going along as an ordinary member of the church, enjoying all the fellowship that one does. And we were in a geographical house group. We changed house groups several times. We moved, and each time we moved, I think it was 2 or 3 times, we then became in the catchment area of a new house group leader.
Okay.
And we'd found ourselves in a particular house group, been with it for some time, and the leader of the house group at the time, we knew him quite well. He was well thought of in the church fellowship, married man, children, but he didn't have a job, and he struggled to find employment.
Oh, right.
And that caused him difficulties.
Yes.
And some of those difficulties came through into the way he ran the house group. And it was clear that some people were uncomfortable, and some people were agitated. 1 or 2 people were irritable. And I don't know what went on behind the scenes, whether he stepped down or was asked to step aside, I don't know. But I do know that I received a phone call completely out of the, like yours on Tuesday, completely out of the blue from one of the elders. Alan, can we come and see you? And I think he came the same evening with another elder. Alan, we'd like you to take on the role of leading this house group. Now that had come to me completely out of the blue.
Right.
I was not expecting that. I hadn't angled for it. I hadn't hankered after it. I hadn't wanted it even. So to be asked to do something that was completely out of the blue was a challenge for me. Now, I'm used to leading people. By then I was a police sergeant and had been for a long time. So more than capable to talk to people. I'd been a trainer as well and encourage them. So that side of it didn't worry me. But I thought, how am I going to tackle the problems that caused him to leave? So that was something that I did pray about. One of the things I was led to do was actually ask the couple who were troublesome, niggling, And what they actually needed was a challenge themselves.
Right.
And I thought they were very good with young people, I'd noticed. So I said to them, would you be willing to take on looking after the youngsters in the house group? The house group was about 20, 25 people strong.
Right.
So a sizable group. And there were half a dozen children, including our own. Yes, they said. And I tell you what, they were absolutely first class.
Right.
And it solved that particular problem. And actually the group became, from then on, gelled very well. And I think that was part of it. And some of the people who'd had begun niggling stopped being so.
Right.
I don't think I was anything charismatic about me being a leader, just the change of leadership, led by God in my view. And that I didn't think about it at the time, but in the context of what we're talking about this evening, a mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I just heard you say, by the way, was, so you had a problem and you prayed about it, you felt led in a certain way and you followed that leading. And I think if we look at the passage that you read in Matthew, that's exactly what Jesus did with his disciples, and he gave them instructions, said do it this way, right? And they had to believe that one, they could do it, and two, that what he said would work. So to actually try it, they actually had to try it. So they had to go without the shirt, they had to go without the spare pair of sandals, jam, no money in the pocket. Okay, I need to go into a town, start talking to somebody and see what happens from here.
And they had to have the faith that they were going to be looked after by the people in the town that they went to, in terms of being accommodation, presumably clothing, and food, all the things that are essential to life.
Yeah, and so lots of the time then, if we talk about being on mission's about actually doing what Jesus tells you to do. And for me, so my experience has been that when I do what Jesus tells me to do, it's all okay. The times I get into difficulty is when I go further or don't go far enough. Yeah,
step over the mark, as it were.
Yeah, and but I've seen times when, so I might think, oh, this is going really well, and I get a bit excited, and so maybe I say too much, or I think, oh, I can do something bigger than I've actually been asked to do, or whatever, and then I find that the challenges come. So it's challenging, it's tricky to follow the instructions that you're given, isn't it?
It can be.
And just to walk down that line and to trust that actually whatever you think, however you feel it should be, God wants you to do it this way, and it will work that way. That's why He's told you to do it that way.
Well, as I said, God provides the tools. If He's going to ask us to do something, He will provide the mechanisms and the ability to do it. I remember when I did promise Joan I wouldn't talk about the police, but I'm going to. When I was promoted to inspector, Chief Constable said to me, Mr. Hammond, you're one of the number of people I'm going to promote into the control room, and I want you and the people who are following you to fundamentally change how the control room is run.
Right, okay.
He didn't give us any instructions on how to do it or what to do. That was the basic instruction. I was the first one in, so the others were following me.
Right.
One of the things that I brought in was a plan to assess the people who worked in the control room.
Right.
Which we hadn't been doing before,
right.
Astonishingly to my. So we're given the provision, because by then I was obviously a Christian, and I brought my values to that, doing that role.
And that's really good. So, by the way, the screen's here because Anna now has COVID, and obviously I was with Anna just earlier this evening, so we just thought it was right to put the screen up so that I didn't pass on any germs that I've got on me to Alan. Okay, so excuse me banging it, but what you said there is really good, because there's a couple of things in there. One, you were actually using the abilities you already have. And I've come across Christians who said, oh, unless God, unless you do something outside of your normal abilities, it can't be God because it's just you. Well, I think that's a load of rubbish. God gave me, every good thing comes from God. So using my natural abilities, God gave us them, and why would He not want us to use them? I mean, it makes no sense. But the other thing is, for me, is the passage in James. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask. So if you're given a task and you're wondering what to do in that task and so on, you've got your own natural abilities, but you've also got the whole option in James of being able to go, okay, Father, what do I do here? And the promise is, if you believe, He'll tell you what to do. And then you get on with it, don't you? You just get on.
That's right.
As best you can. So I think it's that combination of the both. It's using what some people might say your natural abilities, or might be even tuned abilities because we're training and stuff, and also listening to what God has said. Have you ever been in a situation where you literally didn't know what to do next?
In policing or in general?
Any scenario.
I think in policing we work to so many rules and regulations that often isn't the case. I did say this before. If as a police officer, if you follow the regulations that we have to contend with, which very often are based on the same rules and principles of the Bible, then you actually can't go far wrong.
Yeah.
So, but places where I struggled, I'll think about it while we're carrying on.
Well. So today, Jane's on the camera, okay, and Jane's daughter's with us as well. So hello, hi. But when I saw Jane's daughter, it made me remember a film that I've seen with the kids that answered this question. So what do you do when you don't know what to do next? What's the right principle to follow? And in a film called Frozen 2, it gives you the answer. So what's the answer? The answer is do the next right thing. That's what it says in the film. That's what they're saying. And I found that to be true. Indeed, if you want a scriptural basis for it, in Samuel, in the book of Samuel, when Samuel anoints Saul to become king, so the book of Samuel talks about when the kings came to Israel, and the first king was a guy called Saul, and he was anointed king by a prophet called Samuel. Okay, and when he became it, he told Saul all these different things. This will happen. You'll meet this person. Go with that person. They'll give you 2 loaves of bread. Follow those. Do this. And he said all these instructions. And then he finishes by saying, and then do whatever seems right to you. Yeah? And you think, yeah, that makes sense. God's put all this stuff in the Bible.
Yeah.
He gives us all these principles and all the rest of it. And there are times when you don't need the writing on the wall, the big thing. Actually, what you need to do in this moment is the next right thing. Even if that's challenging or not challenging or whatever it is, do the next right thing now. And then that will give you the next step.
And sometimes the right thing might be the obvious thing.
Yes.
And then we think, well, that can't be right. It's too simple. So and then look, and then you overcomplicate something that isn't complicated in the first place.
Far too often.
I'm one of those people who actually does like solving problems. I'm a Sudoku fan, and I like doing jigsaws. What I can't do is crosswords. I really can't do crosswords, but I like the logic of the jigsaw puzzle. Eventually, if you put the pieces together, you'll reach to a conclusion, won't you? And with Sudoku, you can work out the problems. And I do like solving problems. So to answer your earlier question, what I would invariably do is look for a solution. Because there's always a solution to every problem, whether you think there is or isn't. And it may not be what you think it is.
Yes.
It's only a matter of, sometimes we do have to go before God and say, I'm struggling here.
Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah. And then he tells you sometimes it's really bizarre. And sometimes, as you say, it's actually the most obvious thing.
The thing that you thought of in the first minute was too simple, so you disregard it.
Yeah.
And you're not going back to, well, when did I think of that in the first place?
Well, so this isn't a story of my own, but it's one I read in a book when I was younger, and it's always stuck with me. And there was this guy writing about the fact that as a teenager at university, he used to struggle getting out of bed to go to his lectures, and he didn't. Anyway, he was a Christian, and so he started praying, Lord, help me to get up and get out of bed and get to my lectures. Right, and one morning he woke up and he didn't feel like getting out of bed and so on, and he just started praying, Lord, please help me get out of bed. And he felt God could just come back to him and said, well, you've got 2 legs, haven't you? Okay, and I think that's sometimes we forget the blindingly obvious.
The simple solution to people who can't get up in the morning is put the alarm clock in a position where you've got to get out of bed, turn it off, and don't go back to bed.
Now, Jane, my tablet has stopped recording any conversation back to Maddie when she says, hoping you're feeling better, Clive. Is there conversation since then?
Yes, areas, but nothing in particular that you need to address.
Right, so I'm really sorry. I'll try and get my tablet sorted out so it's working properly. So what I'd ask you to be thinking about tonight is, when has God asked you specifically to do things, and how did he equip you? Is it supernaturally? Did he give you some sort of supernatural equipping for it in that situation? And if so, share it. And if he didn't, if he just asked you to do something and it was, you used just your normal stuff, would you put that down as well, so we can start to see how God talks to us and equips us to actually do the missions that he's given us to do? Oh, thanks.
I've got a question too.
Yeah, go on.
I know Maggie regularly watches.
Right.
Is she watching tonight?
Who?
Maggie.
Maggie, yeah, Richard and Maggie are on.
Maggie, of course, had the mission to go out to Japan, didn't she? To become a missionary.
She did.
And I'd be interested to know if Maggie's got anything that she can bring to us in the context of how we're talking this evening.
Yeah, that's really good, because when we think about being on mission, we tend to think of that type of thing, don't we?
Yeah, missionary.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, any wisdom, and indeed if anybody else has been involved in missions. I know, Sally, you went on a mission with Faith Missions. Is there anything like that where you might want to share with us some wisdom that you've learned? Clive and Fiona, I know you did all sorts of street missions and all sorts of things like that. So please feel free to put it in, because we want to learn from each other. Certainly Alan and I are not the font of all wisdom, I can assure you. Okay. So just developing it then, Alan, can we look at that concept about the universal mission and then the specific mission and personal missions that you were talking about? Because you effectively broke it down, didn't you, about things yourself and so on. So in a universal mission then, I see Matthew 28 as being one of the universal missions. Go and tell people about me, about Jesus, and so on. So that's the easy one. Are you ever thought? Are there any other universal missions that God has given us that you've experienced, or you've thought, I need to be doing that? This is one of the foundation stones within my life.
I've thought about the universal mission, and how does the everyday church member see their part in that?
Yep.
We'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
Because some people who might feel, well, it's all very well, we can't all, I think Fiona alluded to this 2 weeks ago, we can't all be evangelists.
No.
And we can't all be church leaders. Some people have got to be the congregation and do the other roles and jobs. So we all have a part to play. But we're all part of the fellowship. But it's not just about going to church on a Sunday.
No.
It's about being part of that fellowship.
Yeah.
And having relationships and meeting people. This particular fellowship doesn't have any house groups, but there are groups of people who meet informally in their own houses, or they meet and they go out walking or whatever.
Yeah.
On a fairly regular basis. And there's this Friday conversation. And we're all part of that.
Yeah.
It's actually how we conduct ourselves in the context of being a member of a fellowship that I believe makes a statement about how we are as Christians.
Right.
So in effect, you're, if you like, evangelizing by the way you are, rather than actually going out and being an evangelist. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, because that instantly makes me think of the verse that Jesus said, "By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, by the way you love each other."
Well, that I think is what I'm alluding to. And what I'm trying to get is to encourage those people who feel, I'm in the background all the time and I don't have a part to play. Well, yes, you do. You can play your part by being an active Christian, and living a Christian life that is visible to other people. Yeah,
and that doesn't have to be, because when we use the word Christian, people instantly start to think of I was going to say ceremonial, but I think you understand what I mean. Those actions that are seen as part of a service or something like that. Whereas actually, that can be anything from a kind gesture, a smile walking down the street, doing nice things, picking up litter. It could be a full range of operations. It's back to doing the next right thing, isn't it? And that can be anything. It literally can be giving somebody a hand, forgiving somebody when they've wronged you.
You never know how your actions are perceived by other people and how they might have a chain reaction at some time in the future, unbeknownst to you.
Yes, and at school, so for those who don't know, I was a school teacher. So when I was teaching, I would often just talk to the kids, and certainly a pastoral group, and they'd ask me things, and I'd start by saying, well, I'm a Christian. And so this is my view, you'll have to draw, come to your own decisions, but this is why I've done it this way. And what I didn't realise was that went through the staff team like a shot. The kids spread that around. And indeed, they went and told the RE teacher that there was a new Christian in the school. But she's become one of our closest friends. And we've done lots of things together. And we created a Christian union, and we saw, 10, 15 of the children that we were working with become Christians. And that all came about because I was prepared just to say, I was a Christian and just be open. And that wasn't a big thing in that context, because the kids were asking me about certain things, and all I was doing was just telling them the truth. Yeah,
well, being a Christian is a lifelong journey, isn't it? This mission that we alluded to here is essentially for us the rest of our lives. And it's being on that journey. We're all on a journey. Enjoy the journey.
Okay, so now I've got Jane's phone here, and so I'm just sharing things. So Anna has said, God asked me to volunteer at the museum. I went along and did what I asked to do as enthusiastically as I could. Okay. Verity, I remember debating whether to go to the National Day of Prayer years ago, but I found the idea incredibly scary, so I asked God. He told me to go, and I felt total peace. The fear came back again, but I could hold on to that initial peace and know that God would help me to do it because he had told me to. Maddie, God made me decide between art and music group. You're doing too much to do both, so God giving a choice, which it was. Maggie, I wasn't brilliant at languages at school, but God helped me with Japanese and gave me a Japanese Christian friend who was burdened to help me instead of practicing her English. Yeah? Maggie again, also in Japan, I had to preach, and preaching isn't my gift. I prefer to be on the edge chatting to people. God helped me, although I never enjoyed it. Right. So, yes, and Anna, the last comment here that we've got at the moment, Anna's saying that the chain reaction is Jesus' parable, that the farmer plants the seeds, but he doesn't actually make it grow, and other people water it, and somebody else comes and reaps, and it's the combined effort of everybody's actions, and we never actually might see the outcome of our seed, our bit of watering or whatever, but it all works together. God brings it all together. That's great, thank you. That's really good. That is exactly what we were looking for. Now, we're getting up to 8 o'clock, Alan. Right, so what I'd like to do is, you mentioned right at the beginning about us exploring some of our own experiences and sharing. So in the second half, we'll, if you don't mind, we'll pick up on that and look at mission through how God's dealt with us. Okay, so at this moment then, whilst I try and get my tablet working again, we'll go to the song and the notices. So is that okay with you, Jane? Great, okay, so we'll see you in a little while after the song and the notices.
And welcome back, everybody, to this Friday conversation with Keith and myself, looking at being on a mission. And we're going to explore that in depth for the next 20 minutes or so around a specific mission. But before we do that, I'd like to bring a couple of things to you that occurred to us and we've been talking about in the break. And one of which was a quote from the last commission, and it was from Fiona, where she said, when God gives us a mission, he equips us to carry out the mission. God always makes it clear. And that second comment was from your daughter Verity, which was again in the same meeting. She actually put it onto the writing there, so I didn't hear her make the comment, but I picked it up afterwards. He, referring to God, enables the called. He is not just calling the enabled, and that struck home with me because we tend to think, well, everything's done by the leaders and the people who've got gifts and so on. But he calls ordinary people as well when they're not expecting it, like he did with me on that occasion when I was asked to take over a house group, and not expecting it at all. And it's not always easy either. And Maggie alluded to the fact that when she was in Japan, that she didn't actually enjoy some of what she was doing. Is that the right? Have I interpreted that correctly?
Yeah.
And we don't always have to enjoy what we're doing if it's for God's purposes. But it's all part of the process.
Yes.
Of doing what we're doing.
Yes, that's right. And as
I'm sure she didn't dislike it. So I don't want to demean Maggie in any way, shape or form. I hope she doesn't take it that way.
No. But you're right. So you've asked if later on we can talk about the ferry project. But for me, there's times within the ferry project, I was shared last time, that there's lots of stuff that God's asked me to do within ferry. And there've been different times when I found it really, really challenging. And I was saying to Alan, so one time I was saying to God, this is really hard work, I don't know how I'm going to do this. This is really challenging to me. And I was actually checking out with God whether what I was doing was right, or because I thought if it being so difficult, perhaps I've got it all wrong and I'm doing the wrong thing. And God simply answered to me by saying, whoever told you it was going to be easy. And I think we need to remember that all because you're called to do something doesn't necessarily mean what you're called to do is easy. And obviously, one of the clearest examples of that is Jesus himself, isn't he?
No, absolutely. You look at the decision he had to give right at the end when he was crucified.
Yeah, so it wasn't easy.
No. Okay, I've got a quote that I want to bring to you. Before I do, Joan and I read most nights. We always pray before as we go to bed. And we also read from a book from Bear Grylls. I don't know if people are familiar with the fact that Bear Grylls is an active Christian, but he is. So for those who didn't know, this is a quote from a book that he's writing called Soul Fuel. And a great friend of his, Bear Grylls, once told him that God's calling always has a birth, a death, and a resurrection, which is a strange phrase to put. Sometimes when you're doing what's on your heart and going where your competency is, something catastrophic happens and you think that's the end of it. But actually that's precisely the time for you to have vision and to hold on. That's the time to dig deep and trust that God will bless the plan that he's set in motion. It's easy to have a vision when the days are clear and the going is smooth, but vision counts most when a storm hits and you can't see through the wind and the debris. That's when you learn to depend on God and not on your own strength.
Yes, I can recognise that.
Absolutely. And so with that in mind, Keith, can we explore the Ferry project for a little while?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
And what I'd like to know is, how did it come about?
Okay, so there's several different strands there, so let's just quickly try and put them together. So first of all, the church, this is back in the 90s. So the church at the time, different people in the church, so Andy, who's part of the church still, Nick and Sue, were supporting homeless people who they met in the community. Okay, and at that time I was still an elder, and I was supporting them in them supporting other people. Okay, so I was a teacher and had done some training around helping kids with behavioural problems and stuff like this. And I felt God called me to be part. It's important to work with people. So that was part of it. So that was one. We were seeing homeless people. Two, I'm a problem solver like you. So therefore, seeing the issues, and to be frank, I talked to other churches, and they were all trying to support homeless people in a different way, and it drove me batty that one church was doing this way, this church was doing that way, and basically I saw we weren't getting anywhere. But three, let's go to the real moment of calling. So it all happened on Christmas Day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Christmas Day, and I think it must have been about 97, somewhere around about there. So one Christmas Day, I was stood by. So I do the cooking on Christmas Day. I like cooking. So I was preparing all the food, and I was peeling potatoes by the sink, looking out the window in our house in Leverington. And my mother and father-in-law were present, and they were playing with the kids. So all quite young at the time. Anna was in the lounge. They were there, so there's lots of noise. I had the carols going on in the background, and in a sense, it's almost an idyllic Christmas scenario. But I felt guilty. I stood there and I just felt guilty, and I just prayed and I just said, "What? Why am I feeling guilty? I should be happy now. What am I feeling guilty about?" And God simply pointed out. He said, "Well, look, you know about all these homeless people, don't you? I want you to do something about it." And I just simply said, "I can't do it. I don't know how to. Don't know where to start. I don't know what to."
It's an enormous project.
Yeah, what am I supposed to do with that? So he just said, no, I want you to do what you can do. Just get on and do something. And so I argued with him for a little bit in my head. And he just kept reiterating, I want you to help them. So I said, okay, I have no idea what that means really. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but okay, I'll do it. I just don't know what you're actually asking me to do. So in that sense, that was where the calling came, and I realised that I had to do something. Now, it took years after that for me to actually turn that into what I call positive action, and indeed there's other things that God did in my life to get me to that point. Because there was a reluctance, there was a fear. So my fear was God was calling me into something where I could see no income. Mm-hmm. And I was a father of 5 children, and I was looking after those children. How do I provide for my family? How can I responsibly do that task, okay, when I cannot see how I can provide for them? That I felt that's just wrong. I must be misunderstanding it. But actually what God was really asking me to do was to trust that he would provide. And at that moment I didn't. And it was a few years later where he put me into a position where I had less choice in the matter.
Oh, right.
And he would teach me how to do it.
Did you have a fear of failure as well? It might not work and everything then falls apart?
No, I suppose in that sense, no. The failure in the sense of letting my family down, yeah, as I said, with the provision and stuff. But not in failing in the task, because there was a...
No, I meant the project might fail rather than your approach to it.
No, if I'm being honest, Alan, and Anna will testify to this, when I was much younger, I was quite cocky. So in that sense, no. And certainly because of that moment at the kitchen sink and so on, I knew that God was telling me to do something. And that genuinely, I did believe that if he wanted me to do something, he would provide the means, except I wasn't able to carry that across to my own family. Yeah, that was a challenge. So yeah, that's where the call came, and of course the opportunity came then later when I lost my voice. So when I damaged my vocal cords and I couldn't speak, and I lost my job as a teacher. So actually, the decision making in one sense was taken away from me. Now, don't think, I used to say I think God took my voice away. I don't think he did take my voice away. In many ways, I think he was warning me beforehand that if I didn't stop teaching, this is what would happen.
Because your voice was lost, he provided another means for you.
Yeah, Anna went out to work and so on. I lost my job as a teacher and had to retire, but Anna was working at that time. So I started looking after the kids. As I got my voice back, that gave me a load of time to actually set up the charity. I never imagined it would turn into a permanent job. I never imagined in a million years I would ever get paid for doing it. So all that was put aside because God provided us with funds through Anna's work and to allow us to live. So in a sense, my question about, well, how do I do this and provide for the family, God sorted out, demonstrated how he could do it. And indeed, he more than abundantly blessed us, because there was all sorts of different channels, and it would be a long time to explain it. But God gave us money by random methods, things that I'd never thought of. We got different bits and pieces of money coming through, which enabled us to live quite well. And let's face it, working for the charity, we've lived well. God's provided all the way through.
I have no idea how you'd go about setting up a charity.
Oh, right.
No,
So one of my skills, you were talking about the vision, and Bear Grylls is absolutely right. Having the vision is a doddle. Okay, so God gave me the vision. So one of the things I can do is I can pitch things. So I'm a picture person. Yeah. So I can visualize very clearly something. So until I've got the vision, I can see in my own mind how to do something. I won't move forward on it.
Okay.
So the way I talk about it is, so if I've got a project, I need to be able to visualize it, and I need to be able to examine it. I need to be able to walk around it, poke it, ask questions of it, and see what the solutions are. And once I've got that, so therefore, with the homelessness charity, it was a case of me understanding, okay, well, the starting point was a home and people to look after it and so on. And so I just broke it down into that way. And what God helped me to understand was, he gave me pictures of how it could be done.
Right.
That's
a gift that many people won't have, because I certainly can't visualise. When we're wanting to redecorate our home, Joan can visualise it, I can't.
Yeah.
I enjoy it afterwards. So the ability to be able to visualise really helps.
It does, and that. So for me, let's be honest. So that's a gift that God's put into me as a human being. It's not. in that sense, it's not a God-given gift in a sense of a Holy Spirit supernatural gift. I had that, but what God did do was anoint it. So he used it, and he used it to help shape. So there's all sorts of things. So the building here, Octavia View. So the first time we moved into this was a very complicated hotel. And all the big rooms that are currently here now, like upstairs in the Lawrence Room, the cafe, that was not designed the way it is now at all. And when I walked around the building, God was saying to me, well, you could take that wall down, couldn't you? And that would do this. And you can take that bit down. And how about that? And so he actually enabled me to see things. So when people started asking me, well, this building's not at all suitable for a hostel, I could go, yes, it is. All you need to do is take this down and take that down, and this will make that space. And this is how we create the bedrooms down here, and here's the way. And I was able to talk through with people exactly how the building could be restructured to operate as an effective hostel. And that was just from the fact that God told me about it as I was walking around the building. And he allowed me to visualize it, so I could actually see it. And even the glass cubes were, God told me, this is how you make this space bigger, and this is what you need to do. So it was, and as I say, I could actually visualize it. So when I was talking to architects, I could actually go, no, this is what I think it should look like, and they would give a representation of it, and I go, yes, no, that's what I was thinking on. So all the way through in that stuff, God generously told me, because I'd never managed a building, I'd never. So none of the stuff, financial work, as I think I mentioned in one of these before, I didn't regard myself as a detailed person, but God taught me how to do the detail because the detail was vital.
The devil's in the detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So the project grew over time, but there's some really wonderful aspects of faith about it. So let me just give you a few examples of where God did amazing things. So Andy and his wife Moira, we couldn't rent property to house homeless people because the local people wouldn't rent property to us. Okay. So we prayed and we asked, we talked to the church and said, look, well, this is a problem, what should we do? And Andy and Moira came forward and actually moved out of their house, rented another property, okay, and rented us their home for a year, okay, so to help us get it started.
That's astonishing.
It's a remarkable gift, wasn't it? It's a wonderful thing that they did. Another time, so we were looking for funding to see if we could buy a house, right? And God gave, I can't remember if it was Nick and Sue or Clive and Fiona who he did, but he gave them the word, the loaves and the fishes, feeding the 5,000.
Yeah.
Right? And what we interpreted from that was that if as a church we gave what we had, he would bless it. So we presented it to the church. Church warmly responded to it. People gave donations. Some people were able to loan a bit of money. Some people actually gave cash. So in cash terms, we got £2,000. Okay, just over £2,000. And so other people loaned us about another 5,000 or 6,000. But using that money, we're able to employ a fundraiser and do some things. And in the following year, we raised over £100,000. And that £100,000 allowed us to buy a house and then to employ the first staff who were to work in the ferry project. And that was because, at that time Clive and Fiona were alongside in the whole thing of the ferry project. Clive was chairman of the trust that was set up. People stepped out in faith. We responded to God, and we had no real idea. You wouldn't imagine, would you, that God would take 2,000 and some loans and turn it into 10,000, so we were able to pay the loans off and be able to do these other things. And yet he did all this. And if we go through the history of the ferry project, there is time and time again where God's just done incredible things, timing down to days, minutes, where we started doing this at just the right moment so that we would be in that position to be able to do an important job at that moment in time.
Definitely God being in charge and making sure that it happened. One of the things you said in the meeting 2 weeks ago,
yep.
Nobody said it would be easy.
Yes.
And there were at times you were almost in despair over the difficulties.
Yeah, and it's about, so So when you're given a task to do, there are always aspects to the task that I would say are alien to you. Okay, but you do not feel this is natural. This is not me, right? And yet God might be saying to you, no, you need to do this. This needs to be done for whatever reason. So in Ferry, there's lots of different challenges. So sometimes it's around the combination of the fact that you've got to do lots of different things simultaneously, and I've got to be dealing with lots of different problems. So I might say in a 2-hour process have to deal with 4 very different things and come up with solutions and answers and respond to those 4 very different things. And that can be very draining, okay? Yeah. So if that then goes on time and time and time again, the whole thing can become really very challenging. So most recently, one of the times most recently when God challenged me about it was simply, we had to do a tender. I was put back in charge of Ferry, so Ferry's now an independent charity again. So I was running the charity and writing a tender that was the equivalent of a 15,000 word essay.
Goodness.
Okay, and I had to do all that. I had to do it all in 4 weeks. Okay, and I simply said to God, I cannot do this. I cannot do this.
Did you find you got opposition from people at any time?
Oh, loads. Right. So the last anecdote, because we're very near the end.
Oh, right.
So this building again. Let's go back to this building. So, one, as a Christian project, when we started, it was purely Christian. It's had to move away from that because of government legislation, but we could talk about that another time. But if we talk about this building, when we went for planning permission on this building, the Fenland District Councillors had to have planning permission. So we went to the Fenland District Council, we got officers' agreement, we were working with the members, the officers of the council for this homelessness shelter. And when we went to planning, a councillor stood up and said, this building is too good for these people. They don't deserve this. We should vote against it. Then another councillor stood up and said, I don't even know why we're bothering to have this conversation. I think we should round up all the homeless people in Fenland, stick them on a bus, drive them to the edge of the district and throw them out. Certainly not be giving them anything like this. And comments like that. One person said, if you give them this building, they'll scare away any tourists that we've got here because why would tourists want to come to a place where homeless people are in amongst all nice people? So we faced real opposition, and we actually got our planning permission turned down
really?
From those conversations. So
that must have been very disheartening.
Yeah, very disheartening. But again, God would come back and say,
I was going to say, you obviously went back to God over that.
Keep going, keep going. Now, Jane very kindly and very gently, because she is a very gentle person, came along and just waved the watch at us because it is now very nearly 8:30. Now, what I'd say to you is this, right? One of the things that God's been saying to me myself is he's been challenging me to actually, in a sense, commit to things. So, what I'd ask you to do now is talk to God about you. In your own quiet times, in your own times with God, ask God, what should I be doing now? Should I continue doing what I'm doing? Is there something else you want me to do? Is it time to stop something? Is it time to start something? Is it time to keep going when all the things are going tough? But talk to God about what he wants you to do. Because I promise you, from my own experience, and it's very challenging, right? He will equip you if he asks you to do it. And just like with the 12 disciples, if he says, don't take a purse, don't take a shirt, do this, do that. If you follow him, it works, okay? But how challenging must it have been not to take any kit when you're doing that stuff? And he does challenge us, but do it, okay? Please do it. Pray this weekend, talk to him, and then give yourself to him. It's much better than resisting, which I did, and led to all sorts of things. Cheers, Alan. Thank you very much for tonight.
Thank you for inviting me along. I know it was very short notice, but I've enjoyed it.
Great. God bless.